Joan Didion is one of America's finest writers. She had been reporting from the front lines of America's social and cultural revolution for more than 3 decades. She is equally gifted as a novelist, an essayist, a screenwriter, and a journalist. It has been 12 years since her last novel, but it has been well worth the wait. The Last Thing He Wanted is a political thriller that entwines a doomed romance with international intrigue that takes its heroine from Washington to Latin America and every place in between. I'm very pleased to have Joan Didion here to talk about this work and her life. Welcome.
Well, it's
great to have you. You must be happy about the reviews after working on this thing.
Well, you know, every time you publish, this is my 10th book. Every time you publish a book, you have this sense of dread. It's just going to be awful. People are going to say terrible things about it. And then sometimes they do say terrible things, and you think it's not really that bad. I can still live. But it's a big relief when they say really
now, this is a it is. I mean,
yeah.
You'd much rather they say wonderful things about you than the other way. You can survive it, but you'd rather they say it. This is a story of a woman who's in Washington. She's the ex-wife of a deal maker, Hollywood deal maker. Her father is a deal maker of his own kind. She ends up in a wonderful sort of kind of romance. Where does the idea come from?
Well, this
It's set in the 80s.
This book came out of, I mean, it began with, I was doing a lot of reporting in kind of this area in the
Central America, or Latin America,
and in Miami. I wrote a book about Miami, and I was doing some stuff in Washington. And in connection with the book about Miami and the book about El Salvador, I was doing some stuff in Washington, and also something I was doing that didn't work out. But there was a kind of, I got interested in that whole period. It was the kind of the middle. It was kind of between it was a fantastic period of the creation of an official story and a whole lot of other stuff going on that everybody on the street knew about. So so I wrote about it in a peripheral way in nonfiction. Then I had this idea that it would go into this novel, so it did.
Your characters, are they modeled, are they straight out of your head, or are they modeled on some composite of people you know, especially this woman?
The woman it comes straight out of your head, out of my head, yeah. They're always usually in a book, at least in my experience, it is the minor characters who sometimes have
close analogies to
real life models, because you might pick up one trait or one something from real life from another character.
And so the same thing is true of Treat as well.
Yeah, he's not any one character.
You know or you think about.
No. No, not at all. There are things of his which people in that period, things that he says that people in that period said, or they said things like them, but it isn't based on those people.
Are you the narrator?
I am the narrator, Joan Didion. I am the narrator. Yeah. Yeah, I got tired of messing around and pretending it was somebody else.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, you like injecting yourself.
Well, I like
the marrying of.
In a novel, when you inject yourself, it's just a device to tell the story. It's a device so you can move around in the story. You can look at different, you have a lot, if you're telling the story, you have a lot of different cameras you're using. You have a lot of angles you're using. If I used to write I think what you mean is that I used to write essays,
yes.
or I inject myself into reporting, which I used to do that. I stopped doing it. I think the last piece I did it on was the White Album, which was about the 60s, but it was written in the late 70s. It was just kind of one of those things that I wanted to do it at the time, and then I stopped wanting to do it. I had some intention of kind of breaking down the barrier between the writer and the reader and talking to the reader in a direct way. I think I thought at the time that a lot of people weren't believing what they were reading. This was during the Vietnam War. A lot of people weren't believing what they were reading in general because there had been built up a kind of barrier between. So I wanted the reader.
When, in fact, people point to the erosion of authority in America.
Yeah.
That's where it came from.
So I wanted to come on to the reader not as an authority, but as somebody who was going to be straight with them.
Credibility.
Yeah, so that was how that sort of came about.
This relationship between the two of you, I want to come back to the last thing he wanted in just a second. Everybody looks to it and says, it's just one of those relationships that works like relationships ought to work.
Well, we've been married 32 years. Right. Yes.
But I mean, it's like you can finish his sentences and he can finish your sentences, and you can work together and you can work apart.
Yes, well, the only thing we work together on is screenplays,
I know.
which isn't, no ego, you know.
Yeah. No ego because...
Because there are always going to be 100 other people
that's right.
involved.
That's right. Somebody else will come in to write their own.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a relationship that has done better than a lot of the relationships in your books.
Oh, yes. Much better. Much, much better.
I mean,
well, we never, you know, at the time we got married in 1964, we thought, well, we don't have, because it was a big, you know, it's a big step. So we thought, well, we don't have to do this. We can walk out any time. So maybe that sense of that we could walk away from it the next day if we wanted to. Maybe that enabled us to keep to stay around.
Does he influence your writing?
He edits it. I mean, and I edit him.
Do you give him credit?
No, he knows it.
There's no acknowledgement credit for...
That says, this book is for...
Oh, well, let's see. This book is for Quintana, your daughter.
Yes, and
right?
for John.
And for John, okay. So that's it, dedication.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, there's no editorial credit here.
No.
People have been commenting on this first sentence, the reviewers. They love the first sentence. Some real things have happened lately. For a while we felt rich, and then we didn't.
Well, that was just, I mean, I was just sitting there. It doesn't, I mean, some people, my English publisher for one, thought that maybe that section ought to be dropped off because this didn't seem to have a direct relation to the rest of the story. Well, maybe you had to be here. But it did have, for me, it had a big sense of the 80s. That was when we felt rich. The 80s was when everybody in this country felt rich. And the trend was very...
Almost there was a glorification of richness.
And if you could always make money, it was right around the corner there was money. Now maybe this was because...
You can make a lot of money for doing little.
Yeah. And all you had to do is keep moving.
Yeah.
And
because everything was going up.
Yeah, and then suddenly we realized that we weren't so rich after all, not only personally but as a country. And I mean, maybe that is just because we all got 10 years older, but since the 80s. But
do you labor over your work?
Yes, I do.
You do, because people often talk about the preciseness of your language, that you can put more in a paragraph than many people can put in. I'm flattering you. In 2 or 3 pages.
Well, you can tell when you listen to how we talk. I mean, I'm not very articulate, so naturally to get down to those, to making it sound all right on paper, I have to work at it quite hard.
Yeah, but I think you're perfectly articulate. I mean, come on, you don't think you're articulate?
No.
You don't?
No.
But you are, to go to a dinner party with you, there's no one who's more interesting to be there than you. You'll express your opinions. You'll tell people what you think. Well, you've never had a problem telling people what you think.
No, but that's because you ask me.
Of course I do. I'm sitting next to you. That's right. Yeah, but I mean, there's also this. You don't look like a killer.
No, I don't.
You don't. But when you put pen to paper, watch out. Yes?
Well, to some extent, I mean, it's not.
It can be.
Well, I mean,
88 pounds of.
Well, it's not hostile. It's more in sorrow usually.
In sorrow.
Yeah, I mean more.
We're talking about the essays now.
Yeah, I mean I have written some pieces which are hard on people.
Yeah. And it's in sorrow, because you feel compelled to say what you think, and that's what it's about.
Yes. Yeah.
Novels are harder for you.
They're not only much harder. Well, they're harder because it's something that when you're doing a piece, or you're out in the world for a while anyway. Then you kind of put yourself in a room and write it over a fairly short period of time. But a novel, you're going to be in that room all by yourself for a pretty long period of time, and you're going to be in a bad mood because it's not going very well. It doesn't go well at first. It just automatically doesn't go well until you're almost finished with it, and then you start having a good time with it. But by then,
you're almost finished before you have a good time with it?
Yes. You do not have a good time with it because it's not going where you want it to go.
And the characters can't take over. I mean, you've got these fascinating characters.
They don't take over until you're quite. The minute they take over, you're within. You can see home. I mean, you can see daylight then, but not until. And that's so that the minute that happens, then you work day and night and get it finished. I actually finished this book in a very short period of time, but I had been messing around with it in a non-successful way for several years. And I actually wrote it in 3 or 4 months.
Is place important to you? Place, locale.
Yeah,
You draw. That feeds your imagination.
Absolutely, I was going to put this entirely in Washington.
But somehow Central America.
I just couldn't do the weather. I couldn't go through a whole year in. Psychically, I couldn't go through the whole year in Washington.
You had to get to Central America.
I had to get someplace warm.
Looking at America today,
mm-hmm.
I mean, are you optimistic? How do you, when you look at where we are, this is one of those broad-based kinds of questions in terms of the politics and the culture and the.
Yeah, I don't know, because I feel very removed from it because I've been too wrapped up doing this and doing a couple of other things that didn't take me out into it. I had started doing some stuff about the end of the Cold War in California and California's relationship to prosperity in America. And I sort of might go back and do some more stuff on that, or I might. But I would
relationship of California and to prosperity.
Prosperity and well, basically, I mean, California has always been made rich by the federal government. I mean, going back, not just the defense industry. If you go back to the federal government built the railroad, the federal government built the dams, brought the water. The federal government built the highways. California has an extremely ambiguous relationship with the federal government, since almost everybody in it at the time I was growing up there professed to be totally independent of the federal government.
You considered yourself at one time a Republican.
Yeah, absolutely. I was a California Republican.
Yeah. And today?
Well, I don't think too differently, but the Republican Party has gone in a direction that I did not, it has gone away from me.
Not the Republican Party you knew and loved.
No. So, no, I am not a Republican.
So what are you, though?
Well, I'm a registered Democrat at the moment. But I wouldn't say that was a descriptive. I mean, that's not a descriptive. Sometimes you register as something so you can vote for somebody in the primary.
So you can go in the primary. So what do you think of the upcoming election?
Well, I guess it's cut and dried. John doesn't think so. John
thinks Dole has a chance.
John keeps placing bets on that.
That Dole has a chance?
Yes.
Or that he's going to win?
No, that he's going to win.
He's a gambling man, isn't he? Finally, tell me about the relationship between Treat and Lena here. I mean, where do they find in each other? Is it the sense of what?
Well, I think that
risk.
I think they find some sort of irreducible truth.
Truth.
They
find a truth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is?
Well, I mean, just in each other. She finds out, basically, that he has faced up to this thing that is going on there, or to a whole lot. I can't quite define it, although we were talking to someone who was interested in making a movie about it. So we were starting to talk about that area, because obviously that area has to be clarified.
Is it clear
it has taken the form of the question, what went on in that room? So we've been starting to talk about that. So that it's a big. So I'm going to have to define it, but I haven't yet.
You'll have to give. I mean, that's the nature of Hollywood.
Well, it's the nature of the screen. You have to look at stuff on the screen, and if it's literal, the screen is literal. You want to know that if you see the room, if you see people in the room, you want to know what they said.
Do these people have faces when you're writing about them? Do they have?
No, they don't. No. I mean, I did have one character once in a book who was very physically clear to me. It was Charlotte Douglas in A Book of Common Prayer. I knew exactly what she looked like. But other characters kind of fade in and out, and sometimes they look one way, and sometimes they look another way. Go ahead. You might catch one image of them that sticks with you.
The Last Thing He Wanted by Joan Didion. First novel in 11 or 12 years? 12 years. Yeah. When's the next one?
Well, I guess it'll have to be sooner than 12 years. But
I don't know. You may live forever.
But I'm going to do something else first.
Like what?
Like a nonfiction book. I'm going to go out and try to figure out what's going on in the country somehow.
And how will you do that?
I don't know. That's what I don't know yet. I have to find a focus. I have to find a story.
I'm in. It's great to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Joan Didion. We'll be back in a moment. Stay with us.